This is Getting Fit with Dr. Moore.
Hi, I am Dr. Moore.
I'm Erica King.
I'm James Brunson.
And this is Clint Cooper. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about weight and mental health.
We cannot recover until we identify, withdraw, and abstain from all addictive foods. Kay Shepard.
This quote is fitting because many times in order to move forward with our process, we must first understand and know what is preventing us from moving forward, what is holding us back, and what ways we can learn to cope.
Absolutely. And so one of the things that we wanted to talk about today was regarding this topic of weight and mental health. And so the first part of this podcast, I wanted to touch bases with you all about eating disorders. What do you all know about eating disorders? James?
To my knowledge, there's a huge population of people who really suffer from eating disorders, whether it be anorexia or bulimia, and then now there's a increasing awareness around food addictions as well. So I think that it's definitely a strong topic that has become very heavy within our community and producing a lot of conversation.
Absolutely.
I think it's great that you mentioned food addiction, James, because many people do not consider overeating an issue or a disorder.
Absolutely. And that was actually one of the key points that I wanted to talk about today is around this idea of eating disorders. Mm-hmm. So traditionally, when we talk about eating disorders, a lot of times people focus in on anorexia or bulimia. Mm-hmm. But what we know that there is something called binge eating disorder. Mm-hmm. And with the new DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, binge eating disorder is actually listed as its own separate disorder, as opposed to being a subtype of bulimia. And so I wanted to have a little conversation around binge eating disorder. So binge eating disorder, also called compulsive overeating or food addiction, as Mr. Brunson mentioned, it occurs when a person loses control over eating. Have any of you ever experienced this idea where you have lost control over eating, or have you ever worked with a client here at our Family Therapy Center who has dealt with this type of issue?
I have.
Tell us a little bit about this.
I have actually both experienced a client, and I myself experienced moments where I've noticed that, hey, I'm binge eating. Say, for example, I try to incorporate a healthy exercise diet into my current lifestyle. However, there are times when I notice that for whatever reason, if I'm more stressed, I'm having a craving for certain foods. And although I may not partake in them often, during a certain period of time, I may overindulge in that particular food. Say, for instance, funnel cakes. With the fair coming up,
absolutely,
being around those junk foods and those things that feel hearty and nourishing to my spirit, but are not, so much nourishing to my body. And for a short period of time, I will overindulge eating, even though I know I'm full, just eating because of that satisfaction that I'm getting from that. And then afterwards, having, those feelings of feeling guilty, not really understanding why I was eating it. But after carefully considering, talking with someone, and exploring food addiction, it helped me to gain a better understanding and knowledge about my habits and behaviors. And it helped me when working with clients that struggle with food addiction and self-esteem, and how the two coincided with each other. It helped us better come up with the understanding and work through that process for them.
Absolutely, because when I think about this idea of binging, one of the things that can often come along with that is after a person overindulges, say for example, you work hard all day, whether you're seeing clients at the therapy center or any other type of job that you have, you go home, you want to relax, you want to perhaps have a slice of red velvet cake, you might overindulge, and then sometimes these feelings of shame and guilt and distress can come along with that. And so it's going to be really important that whenever we experience a time where maybe we've eaten a little bit too much, that we don't fall into this trap of guilt and shame and then perpetuate that by getting more food.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I wanted to mention is when thinking of overeating, the common term is obesity. However, you don't have to be an obese individual to indulge in food consumption. But it is something that people do experience regardless of what body mass index level you are at. If not treated, overeating can cause serious harm to the body and result in physical health issues as well as mental health problems. And so, as was mentioned, the slogan for this program is
Fit mind, fit body.
And so it's really important to acknowledge the connection between the mind and the body and how important it is. And so not only do we have to think about our diet program, but we have to think about that as it relates to our mental health as well as our physical health.
So, our next topic is emotional eating. A lot of us hear the term emotional eating, but not many of us really know what it is. So, emotional eating is the consumption of food as a response to negative emotions or stressors. How many of you have experienced emotional eating at some point in time?
I think it's, I'm thinking right now how I'm just maybe ready to go home and after this long, stressful day to eat all these carbs and have cake and ice cream and all these things that I know are going to help soothe me and make me feel calm and relaxed.
Right.
But then I'm pretty sure when I get up tomorrow, I'm going to feel bad and go to the gym for a couple hours.
Right.
So, yeah.
And oftentimes, that's how emotional eating occurs. It's after an individual has been triggered by stressors, and in a response, they try to cope, but instead of using effective techniques, they use food as that coping mechanism. And oftentimes, they end up overeating, overindulging, and then this cycle forms. Usually what happens initially is the trigger. So if that's stress at work, getting fired, a breakup, then they end up having that craving, oh, I need to fix it. I just want to feel better. So then they go and find their comfort food. And then after having that comfort food, they experience that high, those feelings of happiness, but those feelings don't last. And then they're often, as a result, they experience that shame, that guilt, that self-contempt, that anger for the choices that they make. And in an attempt to deal with those feelings, they end up overeating again.
It's interesting that you use the term craving, and it really makes me think about this idea of addictions. And when I think about sweets, whether it's cookies or cake or ice cream, I think about how really what we're talking about is sugar.
Right.
And there's been so much research that talks about how sugar impacts the dopamine levels in the brain, and then how that can actually create this desire for more of that. And so it kind of fits in with this kind of habitual cycle that goes along with this craving and then seeking the food and wanting more.
And the guilt and the shame, the anger, and even irritability could almost mimic a withdrawal to some extent.
Absolutely.
So what's the difference between emotional eating and physical hunger? With emotional eating, typically you feel that urge coming suddenly. And then there are specific cravings such as pizza, chocolate, ice cream, funnel cakes. You eat more than you normally would, and then you're uncomfortably full because you've overate, and then you feel guilty afterwards and you're upset with yourself. Physical hunger, on the other hand, is a gradual process, and it can be postponed. You can be satisfied with any type of food. So it's not a specific food that you want. It's just being able to eat and be full. Once you're full, you stop eating. And then once you have satisfaction from that meal or eating whatever you ate, there is no guilt or negative emotions associated with what you ate. It's important as we look at eating addictions and issues to understand what are those triggers. Why am I eating? Some of the more common reasons for overeating, emotionally eating: boredom, being anxious, feeling lonely or sad, stress. Another behavior that we really don't look into, childhood habits. How many times growing up were you pacified by parents, uncles, aunts, friends? Hey, if you do this, I'll take you and get ice cream, or we'll go out to eat. If you do all your chores, we'll go to McDonald's and you can have a Happy Meal. A lot of times we don't realize, but a lot of our coping techniques were established in childhood, and we've continued those into adulthood. And so a lot of times that need to fix it with food is unconscious learned behavior. Some alternatives to eating your emotions away: calling someone, exercising, using a stress ball, keeping a food journal, developing a hobby.
Absolutely.
So, as we talk about emotional eating, while those things that we listed as alternatives are helpful, there are other benefits that you can consider. So what about counseling? Counseling gives individuals an opportunity to explore and gain a better understanding about their triggers. It also allows an individual to address major concerns such as depression, loss, self-esteem, and anger that can result from the emotional overeating. And it also provides an opportunity to learn how to deal with emotions and stressors by learning coping techniques. Here at Mercer, we have the Mercer Family Therapy Center located at 655 First Street, and we also have Counseling and Psychological Services, CAPS, which is located on the Macon campus. So if you're available and you're considering, hey, maybe I want to explore this a little further, why not consider counseling? And the address and information has been provided in the slide.
What are some mental health benefits of weight loss? Some of the benefits that weight loss can include is self-esteem, body image, sex drive, and all of that involves brain chemistry. So we want to take a moment to kind of identify and talk about all of these subjects briefly. Self-esteem. Your body releases endorphins when you exercise, which makes you feel good. You convert negative thinking to positive thinking. That's probably one of the biggest ways that you can help yourself lose weight. I don't have time to work out. I'm stressed. I've had a long day.
Right.
Convert those negative thoughts, those negative phrases into more positive ones so you can find time to work out. You've had a busy day, but you've gotten through that. Also, when we talked about making goals in our previous podcast, make sure that you forgive yourself for mistakes and don't dwell on shortcomings that you may have. Keep track of your progress and celebrate the progress and completion of the goals that you have. And then also, one of the things when we do complete goals, we say, oh, well, we've done so good with these things, I'm going to have a cheat meal. I'm going to go and get that piece of cake or that pie or that candy bar or whatever it is. Instead, try to treat yourself or reward yourself with more material things. So maybe there's a book that you wanted to get that you've been kind of putting off. Go ahead and get that book and encourage those more healthy habits. You can do these things.
Absolutely.
Body image is very closely related to self-esteem. So your weight and your body is not a measure of your self-worth. I think that's one of the most important things that I've learned throughout this process is that it's not about what you look like that makes up who you are.
Right.
There's a lot more to the person behind the face, behind the body, your experiences and everything. You got to take that all into account. So physically looking into the mirror and practice self-acceptance and self-love. Telling yourself in the morning that, hey, you're handsome. You look great today. I love myself. Even to as small as saying, okay, well, I'm thanking my legs for carrying me throughout my day. especially if you work standing on your feet for long periods of time. That's something that some people are unable to do. So take time and appreciate that.
So Clint, are you saying that as we continue the process of making better lifestyle choices, focusing on weight loss is not the intended goal, but additional benefit?
Absolutely. There are many benefits to losing weight, but we don't necessarily have to focus on the weight itself. And as we go on, it's more about changing the overall lifestyle of the individual. So if we focus so much on the weight, we're going to be concerned with a number. We're going to be concerned with the scale, with a certain amount of calories that we might eat, or the clothing size that we wear.
And so that could possibly lead to potential self-harm and trying to get there quicker, or using unhealthy approaches to lose the weight.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And all of that can lead or kind of sway you towards one of the previously mentioned eating disorders.
And not only that, but also you talk about this idea of, well, I've eaten these foods and now I feel guilty, and so the next morning I'm going to go work out, but instead of working out for an hour like I typically do, I'm going to work out for 4 or 5 hours. And so then you could completely sway to the other side. And we've also heard a lot about not only eating disorders, but then exercise addiction and other types of ways that people become addicted to finding creative and alternative ways to reduce their weight. So I think it's really important for us to focus in on this idea that we're talking about becoming more healthy. Not about the way that you look, but about the way that you feel and your mental health and your physical health.
Absolutely.
And so being healthy means not doing things in extremes, but understanding moderation.
And balance.
A balance, exactly.
I think as clinicians, we have a huge battle to fight, because not only are we fighting the individual, the process that the person is going through, but also understanding that so much of body image and self-worth is kind of exacerbated by society. So when you meet an individual or a couple or whatever the situation who is really dealing with self-acceptance or self-worth or low body image or self-esteem, it's like you have to challenge that within them too, but possibly even challenge the society that upholds these ideas.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Another one of the benefits is a sex drive. So looking at the things that excess weight is linked to is a lower libido, erectile dysfunction, it can lead to infertility, and then medications that are physiologically or psychologically associated with trying to lose weight can decrease the sex drive. The low self-esteem and depression that can be associated or comorbid with being obese or overweight can reduce libido and cause sexual dysfunction. And then also the lack of stamina and physical ability to perform sexually are things that can be counteracted throughout the process of weight loss.
And if you're having those concerns and issues with sex, that can also impact how you view yourself. And how your significant other views you.
Absolutely. And so therefore you go into another cycle.
Right.
Those reinforce those behaviors, those negative thinkings, and leads right back into that overeating coping mechanisms.
So these decisions and these choices and interactions don't stand by themselves alone. They affect the entire system.
Absolutely. One of the main things that we've almost kind of touched on is brain chemistry. Dr. Moore has previously mentioned dopamine, which we get from sugary foods. And so one of the reasons that we find ourselves in these cycles or in these loops of craving these foods, getting these foods, feeling better temporarily, and then we kind of come down from that and we feel shame or guilt, or we get depressed or those types of things, and then we go back into eating to feel better again, is because of these brain chemicals. And so dopamine is linked to lower energy and weight gain when you have lower levels. And so we look for those sugary foods to kind of pep us back up. And as Erica was saying, those habits are started in childhood. We reward kids with treats, desserts, Happy Meals, those types of things. Absolutely, candy. So looking forward, even with our larger image of a family, if we're still doing that, there are other ways to encourage better behavior, achievement of goals that are not kind of instilling those negative habits that could lead into adulthood. So things that you can replace with that increased dopamine are things like proteins and meats. The next one is acetylcholine. That is associated with brain speed and function, and this will make you crave those fatty fried foods, hamburgers, pizzas, that type of thing. And to kind of substitute that, we can replace that with eggs, avocado, fish oils, and nuts. And those are kind of the more healthy ones of those. The other is serotonin. And so low levels of serotonin are linked to insomnia, not being able to sleep, depression, low self-esteem. And these types of things, or low levels of this, will make you crave starches, salty things, those types of things. And so things we can replace that with are turkey, chicken, and cocoa, just to give a few examples. And so GABA is relaxation and anxiety part of the brain. That's the neurotransmitter that kind of helps us relax. And so low levels of that are linked to emotional and overeating, as we've already kind of discussed, heartburn and irritable bowel syndrome. And some things that we can kind of do when we're feeling kind of antsy is to eat broccolis, bananas, shellfish, those types of things to kind of raise that. And so when we're looking at overall brain chemistry and with these replacements that we've suggested or kind of given examples of, if you're feeling yourself in one of these moods where you're not sleeping or you're not motivated or you kind of feel sluggish or you're having one of those cravings for that certain type of food, go ahead and try to replace it with that and see what happens. And it might not be a drastic change, but as we're talking about overall changing lifestyle, habits, the more we eat healthy and understand the things that we eat and how they affect us is really going to help us understand and feel better about this process.
So as you all reflect on the choices that you're making, your eating habits, it's important to consider all of the topics that we've just discussed, because it affects not just one part of your lifestyle, it affects all parts of your lifestyle. So we encourage you all to join us in our next podcast, where we'll be talking more on the subject of
how to deal with the holiday season. We're going to be talking about coping. We're going to be talking about how do you maintain this new health and lifestyle change after the challenge. And so it's very easy for a person to, follow a plan with everyone once you have that social support, but it's another thing to maintain that afterwards. And so we're going to be talking about what do you do, with the holidays, right? Mm-hmm. Because we're coming up on the holiday season, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And so how do you deal with the idea of wanting to celebrate and be around friends and family, but then also how do you make sure not to fall back into a negative trap? Mm-hmm. How do you avoid pitfalls? How do you make sure not to let a slip turn into a fall? Mm-hmm. So we're going to be talking about how do we maintain this process after the challenge. And so please join us. But once again, we also want to point out that we do believe that the mental health piece is very critical for this process. And so mm-hmm. we do offer services here at the Mercer Family Therapy Center. And so if you're interested, please let us know. But also there's the CAPS Center as well. Once again, you're watching Get Fit with Dr. Moore, and our slogan is
Fit Mind, Fit Body.